What is that?
Hi,
How are you?
okay, so we are live now. Hello, everyone. I, Snigdha Basu, project lead of the Disobedient Girls series at Story.biz, welcome you to the final episode of the Talk series. The anthology titled Disobedient Girls is now available on Amazon. Please download, read, and share your thoughts with the authors. Today's episode is a part of the reward system where select contributors to the anthology get to discuss their writing with author K. Harikumar. Let me begin by introducing our project delegate and the contributors who will be joining us today. K. Harikumar, also known as Horror Kumar, is a screenwriter and best-selling author born in Kerala and raised in Gurgaon. He is one of the top horror writers of India who has written 6 books and the foreword for a British publications horror anthology titled Asian Ghost Stories. The Times of India deemed his 2019 book, India's Most Haunted, as a must-read horror book, and it was listed in HarperCollins India's 100 best books written by Indian authors. The Malayalam translation of India's Most Haunted was published as Indiyile Prathilayangal by Mathrubhumi Books in March 2022. His 2018 book, The Other Side of Her, was adapted as an acclaimed web series starring Kalki Kekla, and his 2021 book, Dakhma, will be adapted by National Award-winning filmmaker Sanjay Nag. His next non-fiction release will be in 2023 with HarperCollins India. He is currently working on the screenplays of multiple Hindi language films and his directorial debut in Malayalam. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So next up is our contributor Haimanti Bagchi. Haimanti is a communication trainer and a business storyteller. She travels and works for animal rights to keep her aligned with Mother Nature. She runs, writes, and paints to put herself out there. She sees objects and situations through her translucent perception of reality. Welcome, Haimanti.
Thank you, Snigdha, for having me.
And finally, Harshita Nanda is an avid reader and lover of the written word. A chance win at a short story competition ignited the writing spark in her. Starting from book reviews, she moved on to writing short stories in flash fiction. Her articles and short stories have been published on leading websites like Shida TV, Mom's Presso, and Women's Wealth. Recently, she has published her debut books in London. Welcome, ma'am.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So I'd like to begin the session by asking Harisa, as our project delegate, what are your thoughts and what was your first response to the entire project?
I'm sorry I missed what you said.
Okay,
I'm just
I'll
setting up
repeat
the
that.
mic here.
So
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you about what your thoughts are and what was your first response to the entire project.
So when Coral asked me, had invited me to be part of this project, I was very elated because see the topic disobedient girls is very close to my heart, and therefore that is something that I always write about. And my stories, whether they are films or books, they're all stories driven by female characters, and all these characters are based on women I've known in my life, and some of them have been very very close to me, and almost all of them sacrifice their youth, their career, their lives, for the sake of their fathers, husbands, children, and a plethora of relatives and neighbors who never matter, after a point of time. So so these women had the right to choose but couldn't, because of these societal dictations and how to behave and live, and because they did not want to be, primarily because they didn't want to be labeled as disobedient girls. So they sacrificed everything, and वही normal life जो भी होता है. And in my stories, I create a world where they outlive their pains and can let go, where they become disobedient girls and chase their goals and ambitions freely. So for me, this title itself, this topic itself, was very very catchy, and I'm glad TMYs came up with this. And some of the stories that I read were outstanding and very exciting. Two of them, which we will be discussing today, I'm sure. And congratulations, Haimanti and Harshita, for writing such beautiful stories.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So, sir, can you tell us a little about the disobedient women from your books?
So the first in my first book, which came out in 2013, When Strangers Meet, although the book is about three men, but there is one character whom I'd label as disobedient girl, and that is Padma. I spoke about this in our first live in January, I guess. So Padma comes, is introduced as this typical eye candy, love at first sight wali girl, and then eventually she comes back in the story as a divorced single mother, and uh, she is a catalyst which makes my protagonist, uh, go back and and think about what he did with his life. So that is Padma, but very short brief cameo. In my second book, I take a step further. From a divorced single mother, there is Lavanya, who is a 16-year-old widow from the 50s, 40s, 50s, and who is being forced to forced to the ritual of sati, and how she dares to marry an Englishman against the wishes of her parents and in-laws. Again, if you put it, it's a disobedient girl. And then came Alicia, in my third book, The Other Side of Her, which became the series called Brahm, the character played by Kalki. uh, she's someone who's a writer who marries a younger man, and this time it wasn't a cameo. This was a full-fledged story, where the protagonist was a female. And Alicia was a woman battling PTSD, and she lost her husband and unborn child, in a car crash, and she gets involved in a murder involving four local men, where everyone, wherever when she's investigating this, everyone advises her to stay away because she is going against powerful men. But she ventures into the mess and finds out the real killer, which is what a disobedient girl does. And in my latest book, the main character, Anahita Anand, is a woman with multiple mental disorders. And there is Meher Hussain, a journalist who has sold her soul to the corporates, battling her demons. And however, fate brings them together in Mumbai. And both of them unknowingly become the heroes of this story, where the conventional men are very powerful, be it Varun, the husband who controls his wife, or Bhau, the politician who controls the state. So all these characters are disobedient girls because they did not give in to the norms that were pressed on them. So these are the ones that have been published. And the next one, again, it's a fiction that comes out in 2013. The non-fiction comes out in 2024. The one that's going to come in 2023 is also about a disobedient girl, but I won't be talking about her right now.
So, sir, can you tell us a little about how you employ the element of horror to throw light on issues, be it personal or social, and how it helps you, the mode of horror?
See, first of all, you have to understand what is horror. Horror is something that stems out of fear, and fear is a very basic universal emotion, right? For ages, society has been using fear to discipline children. Religions have been using fear to shepherd followers into believing the idea of God or whatever it is. So fear is something that we can use to I won't say press an ideology, but to bring a change in the way people think in society. So for me, as a horror writer, when I write a story about I don't write about chudels and Dians, but the thing is, the way the chudels and Dians are portrayed, that's very derogatory, especially in cinema and in pulp fiction. But that has to change. We can bring a positive change by by portraying these chudels and Dains and witches and mohinis as individuals who are wronged by society because they chose to follow their heart, which is what some of the films and books are doing these days, which is what Dakma tried to do, which is what my next book will be trying to do. Films like Bulbul, Pari, they're all trying to do that. So I think horror can be used uh, to 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 bring this change in the way people think. So that's very important.
Thank you, sir. So we'll be now discussing the works of the contributors. Harshita Nanda, can you tell us a little about your short story and what was the inspiration behind it?
So my short story is called Her Hidden Dreams, and this is about a young woman. So she's married very young, like how it happens in rural India, especially. I'm The setting for this particular story was Rajasthan because that is where the inspiration came from. And so this young woman goes to a bigger town. For her, it's a bigger town, Pilani, and sees girls of the engineering colleges, and she realizes that is what she wants for her daughter. She wants that freedom for her daughter. She wants the freedom to pursue, get what she wants, to achieve her dreams, and not be bound in domesticity and be taking care of children and household. And how she goes about, doing achieving the dreams for her daughter. Now, the inspiration for this story was actually the two real life incidents which happened. So, in the story, I've written that she goes for a wedding in Pilani, and there she meets these engineering college girls. So, I was one of the girls in the engineering college, and like this, at a wedding, a woman had come, and she was younger than us, and she had a child. And at that time, because we were young and we were more sophisticated, we used to talk in English, we made quite a bit of fun of her. But somehow the image of that woman stayed in my mind. And my main character is Gauri. So the image of Gauri, when I was writing about Gauri, I could see only that woman, sitting at the Sangeet with the baby in her lap and just watching us just dance her hearts out. And the second image happened actually 3 years ago. So I'd gone on a holiday to Udaipur, and I saw a woman there, a middle-aged woman. She was wearing your regular ghagra choli. Even her head was covered and the ghungat was coming till here. And she was riding the scooty. And it just felt so empowering to me, like this is a woman who is totally traditionally dressed. She would not be, most probably her in-laws would never ever allow her to western clothing. They will never allow her to work outside. And yes, yet she had taken a step out. Riding a scooty itself is an empowerment, because that means she's not dependent on her husband to take her to the market. She's not dependent on the auto wala to drop her child or pick her child from the this thing, from the tuitions or schools. And it gives her a kind of an independence, because and it's sorry to say, because I myself don't ride a scooty or drive a car, and I know how restrictive it can be, to be dependent on somebody else. But for me to see that woman, so somewhere or the other, that was very empowering. So when I first read the prompt Disobedient Girls, I was not very sure, but somehow those two images merged, of that woman sitting in that Sangeet with the baby in her lap, and the woman driving the scooty wearing a ghagra choli. And that is why ghungat becomes a metaphor in the story. It is because her dreams are hidden in the ghungat. She doesn't take off her ghungat throughout the story, but she does manage to achieve whatever she wanted to for her daughter. And it's not the son. That was a very deliberate choice. I wanted to keep it a daughter, because I know in that, because considering I've stayed for 4 years in Pilani, I have come across people, I have come across women who've been married as young as 14, 15, despite the legal age being 18. So it's not that it's not happening. It's just that, it's under the carpet. So I knew that if Gauri had not taken the step, or she had not taken the womb, maybe her daughter too would have, been married off at 14 or 15. So I wanted to change that narrative, and that is how she becomes disobedient. She is still in the framework of society. She's still wearing the ghungat, but she's still achieving her dreams. So that was my whole thought process for the story.
Thank you. Would you like to share an excerpt from your short story for the audience?
Yeah, sure. Chaya looked at the petite girl, her face hidden by ghungat, who spoke passionately about her daughter's education. A girl who, by right, should have been in school herself. Chaya nodded and said, I will talk to an NGO. They might have a steady work with a fixed income. Gauri waited eagerly that day for Sri Ram to come home. She could not wait to share the news with him. But she had not counted on Bhamri Devi's anger. Bhamri Devi was upset with Gauri's interruption when Chaya had offered embroidery work. Moreover, Gauri had kept the money given by Chaya and not handed it to Bhavri. That night, as soon as Sriram came home, Bhavri launched into a litany of Gauri's faults. Gauri, her head bowed under her ghungat, listened to Bhavri Devi quietly. But when Sriram asked Gauri to give the money to his mother, Gauri surprised them by saying no. As I looked stunned at Gauri, she said, I earned this money with my hard work. I have also asked Chaya Didi to find me more work. I will earn the money, I will use the money I earned to send Veena to college. Bhavri Devi scolded, shouted, threatened Gauri that Gauri would be sent back to her parents' home. But Gauri was quietly implacable. Finally, Sriram stepped in saying, I am tired, hot, and exhausted. I want peace and quiet at home, not domestic drama. Gauri, you do whatever you want to, but be warned. Ma should not be complaining that you are leaving household chores unattended, nor should my comfort be affected. Gauri nodded triumphant, while Bhavri Devi glowered. Rupee by rupee, Gauri started saving. Chaya helped Gauri get more jobs, while Bhavri Devi kept hindering, and Sriram remained indifferent to what was happening at home.
Thank you, Ms. Harshita. A reminder that Her Hidden Dreams is a part of the anthology Disobedient Girls, which can be downloaded from Amazon. So now over to Hari sir. What's your review of Harshita's short stories?
See, when you sent me all those stories, writers के नाम नहीं लिखे हुए थे, so I had no idea who has written what. I was just reading them very objectively, and this was one story which I absolutely loved. This story, for me, because this is the reality of the smaller towns and villages, even to this date. Okay, because this story has been, first of all, it's been written with such maturity. The choice of the characters, their what they are doing, and even the names. Gauri itself is a name that is, it's an empowered name. If you look at it, we worship Gauri. Okay, so we have that image, but she's in the ghungat. She's, if you, at the start of the story, Gauri is someone who's inside the ghungat, and she throughout the story remains inside the ghungat. But the only difference is that she breaks the rules that have, that had chained her, and starts doing things for the sake of her daughter's education, so that she gets to live a life which, Gauri couldn't. So I think it highlights the evil social customs followed by people in the smaller towns. Dowry, because it starts with the dowry, if I remember.
Right.
TVS Scooty was a dowry, which, they didn't like. They wanted a car. See, this is something which still happens. Even in the cities, it happens. It's not just the villages and the smaller towns. Even in cities, it happens. Cities like Gurgaon, I know people, who, कन्यादान कर देते हैं और साथ साथ बहुत बड़ा बेंच या स्कोडा भी देना पड़ता है, right? It's still happening, which is sad. The demand for a boy child, that was another issue that the story talked about, and denying education for the girl child. I think these three important matters, and a woman working is again another thing which the story dealt with. So for me, Gauri was a powerful protagonist, and her moment of triumph came when she, when those people from the government office come and, offering the job for the next of kin, and she says, so my sons are very young, they can't take up the job, so I'll take it. I think for me that was a punch dialogue, if I had to put it that way. Filmy dialogue, filmy way mein bolna hai, that's the punch dialogue. And then the second punch dialogue comes from the daughter, Veena. When the mother is going to work and this girl is chopping vegetables, and it's like, no, this is not what I wanted you to do. I'm going for a job. I'm going to work so that you can study, and, and says, no, you go concentrate on the job. I think that was again, a very powerful statement coming from the kid. So I think overall, this her hidden dreams, was one of the best stories that I've read in this thing.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. That was a very detailed review. Thanks again. Um, Now we move over to Haimanti. Can you familiarize the audience with your short story and tell us a little about the inspiration? Go ahead.
Thank you, Snigdha, for first of all giving me this opportunity to speak story. And the inspiration actually came from the stories which I've heard from my childhood, which I've read from my childhood. The stories like Panchatantra. right? So the animal fables, used to intrigue me a lot, and it still does, because the beauty and the liberty of animal kingdom, they don't have any physical boundaries. There's no mental boundaries. They are free of inhibitions of expression, may it be love or anger, or any kind of stress or whatever. So they are free of inhibition of expression, which I think humans are not. We have evolved, and so we have a lot of boundaries which we have created. And so this story is about the journey of an ant queen who has this characteristic of really delicate and really subdued, but she has a very big heart, and she has really big dreams. So she always would wish to go to the snow-clad mountains which were visible from their kingdom. Their kingdom's name was Vilasa, the luxurious one, and bring nectar from the garden of the sweetest nectar. And because they lived in a kingdom which was ruled by her husband, Saragya, who was the powerful one, and she expresses her wish to go to these mountains. And this, her husband is really disgusted and angry that she's taking her own decisions, and she's talking about what she wishes to do in life. And that's when Muktahast recognizes her free spirit and embarks on this journey full of challenges with her childhood friend. Tells us that if something called nirvana is there in this mortal world, it is the liberty to choose what one wants to choose, what one chooses to be, the challenges, the repercussions of the decisions we take, the success. Everything is so subjective, and it is all about the first step when we decide that we need to take control over our life, our decision, our responsibilities. And we take responsibilities of our mishaps and the happiness also. So this is all about the story.
Thanks, Haimanti. I personally loved your short story since I'm very much into fables. For the audience, would you like to share an excerpt from your short story?
Yes, sure. So this is from the place where the ant queen Muktahast is actually talking about this wish of her to go to those snow-clad mountains at night. She tells her husband. So I'm reading the story. um, Muktahast discussed this with her husband at night, and Sarakya was brewing with anger with every dropping of her word. Never will I be able to allow you to go to those dangerous terrains. Would you know of the place? Behave like a queen. What about our children? Do not put this through again in our conversation. I'm just done with your stupid dreams. She knew it was time. If the queen of the tribe is not free enough to take her own decisions, no one in this tribe would ever respect the decision of females in their family. She understood arguing will only complicate issues. She will go to that garden. She will bring that nectar and return the favors of her subjects, who have always brought food for her and looked after her children. Thank you.
Thank you. A reminder that Hemanti's short story is a part of the anthology Disobedient Girls. It can be downloaded from Amazon. So, sir, do you have any feedback for Hemanti's short story? So, you're muted.
Yes. So Nirvana, I think it was very imaginative. It was very visual, and the names that you chose, Muktahasta. I mean, that was, and the fact that it was all ants personified, that made it very, very different from the rest. And I like the way, you even Nirvana, the nectar that she wants to attain. It's when I was reading that Queen, the Queen, I was somehow relating it to the word bride in our Indian society. The Dulhan, Dulhan is considered Lakshmi, the goddess, and everything. But at the end of the day, she is someone who's confined to the kitchen or whatever it is, right? So that's what I felt when I was reading it. That's the only way I could perceive the story. You must have written it with your own way of your own thought process. So for me, almost every married woman can relate with Muktahast, and the nectar that she dreams of getting can be her ambitions. Which in this case was nirvana, while in the real world it could be financial freedom. Also, making them ants made it even more universal. That every individual, no matter, I think there's a dialogue there somewhere that every individual, no matter how rich or poor, from whichever creed or caste they belong to, they can have big dreams. I think that's what the other queen asks Muktahas, right?
Right.
Such small lands and with such big dreams. I think those things made it very, very realistic, and like you said, it was like a Panchatantra tale for me. It was very imaginative, and the helicopters and all. I mean, I think that was very. It was a beautiful
True.
story and very symbolic.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Um, Thank you, sir. So we now move on to the questions from our contributors. Since this is your reward, you are encouraged to ask questions that you may have. Anyone may go first.
Shall I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, sir, horror is a genre where I had started writing a story recently, and it was very, you can say, chilling experience for me. So when I was writing about this story, I had to take frequent breaks, and once I completed the story, I don't want to go back to it to revise. The reason being that it was very chilling for me after writing that story, as if I was, actually living that what I have written. So, just wanted to ask that when you have written stories which are, mysterious, which are, horror element is there in the stories. So, how do you deal with the, kind of detachment which you need once you write the story?
Detachment from the horror elements or from the characters and the world that you've created.
Yeah, the world that you created.
So I think that comes with every book you write. When I wrote my first book, I couldn't detach myself. I was so into that particular story. I couldn't even take a an outside judgment against it. So for me, the story was perfect. Whatever I wrote, my first book, for me it was perfect. When the editor she gave me feedback, I was like, no, 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 no. This is how it is. This is how it should be, right? But with the second book, I realized no, feedback is important. Third book again, more feedback. Fourth book, though, I was all totally taking all feedbacks. Okay, give me this feedback, give me that feedback from the editor, from my friends, from very good voracious readers. So, and the most important feedback that you should get is from your own self. That is why you have to go back and revise your stories completely. See, you can't be detached because it's there in your head. Whatever you have
Yeah.
written, it's all in your head. Okay, so it's impossible, practically impossible to erase all that unless you are some yoga guru or whatever, right? So the thing is, you have to keep an open mind. If it's horror, whatever genre it is, you go back to that story, you start afresh as if this is a story somebody else has written. What I generally do is, when I finish writing, say for example, I'm writing an episode for a web series. I've written the first episode. So when I'm writing episodic things, I don't usually take a break. I write it in one go because if I take a break, then I might lose the continuity. But if it's, say, for example, I've written the entire 8 episodes or 7 episodes, then I take a break. I don't go and revise it. I take a break. I read something else or I watch some other film. I might even uh, change the genre. I might watch a comedy film or I might read something like an uplifting Paulo Coelho book or something. And then I go back to the revision. So this time when I'm going back, my mind has been corrupted by the film that I watched or the book that I've read. When I say corrupted, it's not a derogatory term. I'm just using it like that. But my mind is totally filled up with those things. And then I again restart the revision. I try to be as critical of my own writing as I can. And then I think it works out. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Miss Harshita, do you have any questions for sir?
Yes, I do have a question. I actually want to know, like, we have these prompt-based competitions, like TMYS was one of them, of course. And usually they have very strict word limits and they usually have a theme also. So my question is, what are the pitfalls that a writer needs to avoid? There are actually a couple of questions based on this, basically. So first is, are they actually good for a writer to hone their skill? Like, I am a pretty newbie writer. I started writing only about like 2 years ago, seriously. So are they good for a newbie writer? Second is, what are the pitfalls that we should avoid? And third is how do we avoid the dependency? Like, this is something actually we were discussing somewhere else also. How do we avoid the dependencies? Because these are prompt based. Yes, they're prompt based, and usually sometimes, like even for this story, I had to really truncate the story so that I could fit in within the 2000 word limit. So in that case, what would you suggest? Do we go for the competition, or just let it be and wait for some other thing or some other competition, or just let the story be the way we have planned it in our mind?
Okay, so for this, first of all, every writer cannot be, I mean, if you're a professional writer, that is your bread and butter is dependent on your writing, then trust me, everything that you do is prompt based. I'll tell you how. For example, I'm writing a horror. Right now the demand is for horror comedy, and I'm not a fan of comedy. Okay. I'm more of a psychological horror. I always align myself with that. But then if the demand is for horror comedy of the Chudel kind, right? Which I kind of I find it disgusting. But if that is what the demand is, and I get opportunity to write something like that because it's my profession, I will do that. Now the next thing is, if it's a film, I'll be told it's a 90-minute film. Again, I'm going to restrict myself, and then I'm told this is the actor that you are looking at. Then we have to write the character based on the actor. Okay, so if it's a web series, it has to be 8 episodes or 10 episodes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes. There are so many, restrictions that you cannot really do what you want to do unless you are going to produce your own film, like a Stanley Kubrick does. You're producing your film, you're directing it, you're writing the script, then you do whatever you want. But if as a writer, if this is your profession, then you have to stick to all these limitations, because somebody else is, for the
Right.
commercial aspect, even when it comes to a book. So when I'm writing a book, I also have a prompt, I also get a prompt. So I know that my books are mostly with female protagonists. So that's something which is set. So whenever I get like the recent one that when we discuss with our editors, when we propose an idea, like when your query letter, when you send a query letter, that 2 page needs to have a story which interests the editor or the publisher, right? But then they'll also have their suggestions there. This is what is working in the market, this is what will get more readers, or this is what is working, this is what is not working. So those are also like prompts only. They're not guidelines, but there are more or less like prompts. So then you write your story. When you're signing your contract, you'll have another prompt that this has to be 60,000 words or 50,000 words or 240 pages. So these are all prompts. You have to live with those prompts. Unless and until, of course, you are the ones who's publishing the book and you don't have to answer to anybody else, then there is no prompt. When you're making a film and you have enough money to make your own film, you've got the crew and everything, then you can do whatever you want. But if you're looking at a producer to produce your film, then obviously you have to look at the market. If you're going to an OTT, then you have to look at the OTT's market, the TG, the target group. If it's a publisher, then the publisher will look at their target groups, their readership. So all that matters. So then there, these prompts will matter. So if it's TMYS, you had prompt, so you have to stick to those prompts.
Okay.
Otherwise, you cannot be part of the TMYS
Right.
anthology, right?
Right.
So that's that. So you have to. I mean, it's not an advice, but as a writer, I also get these feelings. Now, why am I sticking to this? Chuck all
No.
these things. I'm going to write, the way I want to write. But I think, see, that's a choice you have to make. What was the other question?
Other one is are there any pitfalls? What I'm talking about pitfalls is like disobedient girls. Now, most, or actually, I don't know, but the immediate thought when you talk about disobedient girls is, a bra burning feminist. So how do you avoid a pitfall in writings, or if there is any other pitfall, how do you see beyond the ordinary? How do you do that? Uh,
That depends on how you're thinking, right? Everybody doesn't
right,
think in the same way. I think
right,
that's even when I got this invitation for TMYS, that was mentioned somewhere. The writer has to interpret it in his or her own way.
right,
So for someone who's seen this or who's influenced by this bra burning feminist, they are going to write about that. Someone who's seen a girl wearing a ghungat sitting in a sangeet function, and someone who couldn't ride a scooty but was dependent on a male in the family, so that she could be taken somewhere, that person will be looking at it in a different way, which is what I think inspired you to write your
right.
story. So I think that's individual experience which comes there. But if you're talking about pitfalls when you're writing based on prompts, then it depends on the kind of prompts you're taking.
Okay.
I mean, I'm kind of still confused with the question. Was it about the prompts or was it about?
No, that's okay. It is basically pitfalls in writing also, and of course pitfalls as in uh, sometimes we try and do extraordinary and we fall flat on the face, and sometimes it's the simplest things which work the best. Like, because I do not think that in my story Gauri did anything extraordinary, but even her simple this thing makes it extraordinary. So I think yeah, even I'm a little confused now, but but I think I was mainly asking about pitfalls in writing. Is there any pitfall in the writing process that we need to avoid, especially when it comes to prompts?
So writing process, mein, there's one pitfall that you should avoid. That is when you start planning too much. When you start planning that you have to write 1,000 words a day or 500 words a day, don't do that. I think that's the biggest pitfall that a writer can fall into, because then it becomes a repetitive job. You're just trying to finish that job.
Right,
A better way would be, a better way would be keep a deadline rather than keeping a time word limit or something. That you don't keep a limit like you have to write 1,000 words a day, because you never know. Some days you'll write 2,000 words, some days you won't be able to write anything at all, some days though you won't even feel like opening your laptop, right? So don't do that. Instead of that, you should try keeping deadlines. So for me, if I have a contract signed and the publisher has asked me to submit the manuscript, on say June 6th or something, then I make sure that I finish my manuscript and revise it by May 5th. So that's 30 days before that. So for me, that deadline works, because maybe that's how I became an engineer. When we were in engineering, when we were studying engineering, we never used to study during our lectures. It was always when we know how exam is date ko hai. If the exam is on
right,
the 5th of June, then I'll start studying on the 3rd and I'll finish it by 5th morning. So I have this thing and it works for
right,
me. I don't know
right.
if it will work for another person. Maybe for some, the other method works. Writing 100 words a day or 500 words a day works. But for me, that doesn't work at all.
Right. But I'm sorry, just one more question. But if supposing you have a prompt and you just come across, you it clicks and you start writing, and the it's like it happened for this story, but it wasn't much. I didn't have to truncate much. Maybe from 2500 I came down to 2000. But supposing it goes longer, then would you suggest just leaving it for some other thing, or you know, truncate it? Supposing if it went on till 3000 words and the word limit is 2000, because sometimes when you are in the creative flow, you're not, when you're writing the story, you're actually not looking at the word limit. It's the word limit only comes when you're editing. So then what would you suggest?
So there, I would suggest it depends. You know, if you, so for me, it works differently. If like I said, I work on deadline. So if I
Yeah.
know that my dead end is for 60,000 words, then I'm already set that way. But still, when you're writing, you end up with 70,000 words. And again, you have to edit it. You have to revise it. I think Dakma is one book which I revised 13 times.
Okay.
13 times I had to revise it. My editor
That's
revised it
huge.
thrice. Yeah, I mean, every time I revise, I find no, this is too much. Iski zarurat nahi hai. I don't need this. I don't need that. So eventually, when the manuscript, the final manuscript, it had around 55,000 words. From 70,000, it came to 55,000. And this was not based on the editor's feedback. This was my own feedback. You know, watching a comedy film and then getting back to the horror book, switching this and that. So that's that. But coming to your question, if you're when you're right, so this has actually happened to me. I'll share that incident with you. My first I shot my first short film when I was in final year of engineering. This was 2010. I had no idea about writing a screenplay or editing or filmmaking. I just went with a camera and I shot a simple script that I had written. Okay, so that script was a five-page script for a 6-minute movie. I made it, and then suddenly, I realized, this is something which I can develop as a book, and I started writing. So this was just a 5-page script which developed into a 200-page novel, which was my first book called When Strangers Meet.
Okay.
So again, this story that you've written, suddenly one fine day you feel like, this is something that I can work on. Because when you're writing a film or a novel, you have to work on each character and each character's dynamics with the other characters. In a short story, it's very simple, it's very easy.
Right.
But when you're writing a novel, becomes very complicated. Otherwise, everyone looks the same.
Right.
The way they talk, the way they deliver the dialogues, each thing has to be different. Otherwise, it's just you speaking as different people.
Right.
So that is something which you will only have to figure out. But make sure that you're not signed any contracts where the IP
Yes.
is with,
Yes.
Coral, don't kill me here. Don't. But this is very
Yes.
important. If you've given your the rights to your story to the whoever is conducting the prompt or whatever it
Yes.
is,
No, I'm
then
very
you can.
happy at the home for this story. That's why. I'm very happy with the home that the story is got. That's why.
No, that's okay. I mean, you can
Yeah.
always
Yes.
develop into a bigger story. Because when if this particular story reminds me of this recent movie that came out with Ranveer Singh, Jayesh Bhai Jordar. I mean, when
Okay. Thank you so much.
that also had a very similar setting, in Gujarat. It
Yes.
was Gujarat and a
That is
very
Gujarat. Yeah.
middle class household and the whole thing of girl child and all those things. So
Yes.
yeah, I hope I was able to answer that question.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you, sir, and thanks, Ms. Harshita, for your question and sir for your inputs. It was thought-provoking. Are there any more questions for sir?
Okay, I can ask one more question. Um, um, I I wanted to ask you that you have written screenplays as well as novels. So, what is the basic difference while you write? I mean, the writing process while you write a novel versus while you write a screenplay.
Okay, so screenplay, it's very simple. Whatever plays on the screen is your screenplay, correct? So when you're writing the first draft of screenplay, this goes to the producer or the actor, whoever it is. It doesn't need to have your whole camera setup, how the camera is going to, show this and that, where the camera is placed. We don't need that. It's just how things are going to appear on the screen. These are just instructions for the entire crew or cast to understand the film. So it's all visual. Everything is visual. I cannot go inside the mind of the character. When it comes to a book, I can even go inside the mind. I can say, Haimanti is standing there. She's looking at this. Is sitting on her bed. She's looking at the screen and she's thinking, why is this bald guy blabbering so much? I can say that, but on a screenplay, if I do that, it becomes a dialogue which is running in her head. It's a voice overlap. It cannot be written like that. I cannot write what you're thinking unless it's a dialogue. So this is the basic difference between writing a manuscript and a screenplay. So you have to understand that a screenplay is a visual language, right? So when you're writing a screenplay, you think visually. If you, it's like say how you're going to watch a movie. If you're writing Sholay, then the entire scene has to play in your head so that you can type it out and produce it on paper. Manuscript, there are a lot of things. It's very objective. You're like in a you become god or something like that. You're in a god mode or something, where you can write about everything that is happening. So that basic difference is there. So for me, luckily, I am more of a visual writer. Even before I became a fiction writer, I was an aspiring assistant director. I was an aspiring screenwriter. So
Okay.
for me, it all began like that. So even when I'm writing a novel like Dakma, a lot of people have told me it's very visual, including directors who have filmmakers who have read the book. They told me the same thing. It's very visual. I could see it. Usually, when it's a book, it's more about the thought process that is going. It's more on that side. It's very difficult to visualize everything unless you're directing the reader to visualize it. So that's the feedback that I've gotten because I started from screenplay writing.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir. So I think that was all. Uh, are there any more questions? No. Okay. So that marks the end of our session today. I'd like to thank Hari sir for the very insightful inputs and for your time this evening.
Thank you for having
Uh,
me here. Yeah.
Miss Haimanti and Harshita, I hope you had an enriching time.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
A reminder that Tell Me Your Story is calling for submissions of essays, poetry, and short stories for TMYS Review September 2022, themed on food and drinks, of which I am a project assistant. To know more, please visit tellmeyourstory.biz. Till then, stay well, safe, and a very good night. Thank you.